We just finished modeling demand for a typical good or service. And what we found out is that common sense tells you that prices and quantity demanded are inversely related. In other words, the typical demand for a product satisfies the law of demand. Okay, and what that simply means is that the demand curve, the graph of the demand for a product or service, is negatively sloping. If we raise the price of the product from P prime, where there's a quantity demanded, Q prime of the product, if we raise the price of the product to P double prime, the quantity demanded of the product will fall to Q double prime, and vice versa. In other words, you're moving from one point on the curve to another point on the curve. This is different from changes in demand. A change in demand is something that actually shifts the curve itself. And specifically, an increase in demand would be a rightward shift in the demand curve, while a decrease in demand would be a leftward shift in the demand curve. Okay, and the way we analyze this is that the way we think about this is at a particular price level on the original demand curve, Q prime would be demanded at that price. A fall in demand says that at that same price level, there would be less of the product desired, say Q double prime worth of the product. An increase in demand, on the other hand, would say at that price level, more of the product would be desired, say Q triple prime worth of the product. So while we analyze the law of demand and changes in quantity demanded by changing the price of the product, we actually analyze changes in demand holding the price of the product constant and changing something else in the model. In other words, adding a shock to the model that influences our desirability of that product or service at any price level. Okay? I know this sounds complicated, but it's actually not. Bear with me for a little bit. We have some demand curve shifters that we are going to explore. And I'm going to list all of the shifters now, and then in the subsequent videos we will go over each of the shifters and how they operate. Within the context of changing demand. In other words, shifting the demand curve. One demand curve shifter is a change in the number of consumers. Another demand curve shifter is a change in income levels of consumers. Okay. A third demand curve shifter is a change in the price of a related good. Okay, and a fourth demand curve shifter A lot of things can change demand, but the ones we're going to focus on are here. And the fourth one would be a change in expectations. And one more, a change in preferences. Okay, these are the demand curve shifters that we're going to focus on in these lectures. In other words, think about these shifters as shocks to market demand. If we add more consumers into a market, what happens to the demand for a product? If we subtract consumers from the market, what happens to the demand for a product? If we change people's income levels, say by changing tax rates, income tax rates, how would that affect the market demand for a product? If we change the price of products that are related to the product we're analyzing, how would that change the demand for a product? So these are all shocks that we're going to inject into our demand model and then analyze how demand changes given these shocks. Again, I want to emphasize this. This is probably the one thing that trips students up the most. A change in demand is a shifting of the curve. If you change the price of the product that you're analyzing, you do not shift the curve. You move along the curve. In other words, you change your quantity demanded. But if you change anything else that affects the desirability of the good, then you're shifting the curve. Again, change the price of the product, you move along the curve. Change anything else that affects the desirability of the product, you shift the curve. That's very, very important.